This is a short tutorial about configuring continuous deployment in Azure through GitHub. Here's an application I've developed in Visual Studio. It's a REST API with its source on GitHub. I'm also hosting the application in the cloud in Azure. I have to deploy to these two places separately, pushing to master on GitHub and deploying to Azure. But what I really want to do is push to my GitHub repository and have the code automatically compiled and deployed to Azure. Moving forward, I'm going to make a few assumptions. I assume you already have an Azure account. Also, you are manually deploying your Azure web app through Visual Studio or another IDE, and I assume your project codebase is managed through GitHub. Let's look at the basic steps before we run through it. Step 1, navigate to your Azure dashboard. Here's the URL if you don't recall it. Select your app service that you're hosting there. Step 3, click the deployment options. Then we're going to choose our source to be GitHub. After you authorize with your GitHub credentials, we will choose which branch to deploy. In this case, I'm just deploying master. Here's my Azure dashboard. I want to set up CD for a REST API for an Enigma encryption machine API that I've written. Let's take a look at my running app services. Right here is my Enigma machine REST API. If we click it, under the deployment section, we can configure the deployment options right here. Our first step is to configure the source. In this case, I'm using GitHub, but as you can see, you can deploy from other code repositories as well. Bitbucket, Dropbox, whichever. So I'll select GitHub. As you can see here under authorization, I've already authorized my account through GitHub, but you'll have to click it and authorize yourself. Now I'm going to select the project that I want to deploy. You can see that Azure has access to all my GitHub repos, but I'm only looking for the Enigma machine REST API. Next, we'll choose the branch. As you can see here, I only have 2 branches, and I'm choosing master. And finally, I'll click OK. Notice in the top right, we get our success dialog. This is GitKraken, my Git client I use for GitHub. Now I've made a few changes to my REST API, and I want to commit them and then push them to master on GitHub. So I just added a few comments and committed them. And there we go. Now after I push to master, I expect this to be auto-deployed to Azure. So let's take a look. Let's push those and push successfully. Now let's check my Azure account. I'll check all my app services and click on the Enigma machine REST API. Now on the top right, you can see it lists my GitHub project there. That's a good sign. So let's click on the Deployment Center. It's 4:37 right now, and you can see at 4:37 there was a successful deployment. And let's scroll over to the right here, and there it goes. There's my commit message, adding a few comments.